All right. All right, let's get started. So this week we want to talk about video. Before that, let's talk about some logistics. Can we have some of the lecture questions from Feb 20? It's been since, that's not too long ago. Since Feb 26, graded on Autolab. Yeah, I'll get on. I am a little behind on lecture question grading right now. I deployed some countermeasures. There's a significant number of students who do the lecture questions without being in lecture. So I've been holding off on releasing the grades because, I don't know, for reasons. I don't want to get into too many of the details. But it's time to start releasing them. I'll start getting them up there. You're the first person to ask, so now I know there's some pressure on me to get those out. Do we need to have a team meeting over the break? No. Similarly, do we need to continue having team meetings if we finish early? Yeah. Yeah, you need to have team meetings each week. You don't have to have meeting over break. I look at break as a complete void in the schedule, like this week doesn't exist anymore at all. So any deadlines that would have been this Monday get pushed back, which is just the part one. Everything just gets extended by a week as if the week doesn't exist. That includes team meetings. You don't have to have team meetings during the break. But besides break week, you should still have a meeting every single week for your project, even if you finish early. I need to at least see the meeting submission for each week. I'll count the number of weeks, like from the beginning of the first part to the deadline. So from week 5 to week 9. So what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 weeks for part 1. I'll be looking for 4 meeting form submissions from each team member. So I got to see those 4, 1 for each week. If I don't see those 4, then you're short on meeting forms. What about YouTube videos? Yeah, bug. Man, this is microphone control. I thought I put this down enough. All right, with videos, yeah, bug Gerline about that. Post on Piazza or something to get her attention. I yelled at her in the meeting last week, but she just said she's on it, but not as quickly as I had hoped. Will we be submitting part 1 for the project on Autolab? No. I'm pretty sure that's explained in the document. There's a whole hand-in section. You don't really do anything for the hand-in for part 1. We go to your repo, and the last commit before the deadline, that's what we grade. YouTube is, she still didn't do it? Oh, damn it, 4 weeks behind. Never mind, just checked and it's updated an hour ago. Oh, okay, problem solved. Is it fine if I submit the team meeting form a couple days after the meeting? Yeah, that's fine. No one really responds to Piazza. I haven't been watching. If that's true, if the TAs aren't responding on Piazza, that's a separate thing I can address. Is that true? 2 thumbs up. I mean, that's 3 of you saying it. I might have to yell at my TAs about Piazza too then. We sometimes get feedback like this. Like if y'all post on Piazza over the weekend right before a deadline, like you're not getting answers like since Friday. There's no way you're getting answers 3 days before a deadline over a weekend. The expectation for my TAs isn't that they sit there all weekend answering Piazza questions. But if it's been a problem before last Friday, then that's something I got to address with my TAs. But if you posted like last night saying, oh my God, the deadline's coming, I need to get yeah, you're not getting an answer. You might get an answer like sometime this week. But so it depends the context of that comment. A lot of y'all seem to agree with that one, so I think that's probably something I'll have to look into a bit more. Can the autograder be reverted so we can see error messages? Unfortunately, no. There's at least one that I caught. Student throwing their own custom error messages to access my test cases and then reverse engineering based on my test cases. So if input equals whatever my test case was, then return this thing that I'm expecting to return. With people cheating like that, unfortunately, that's why we can't have nice things. Somebody's going to ruin it for everybody. It sucks. I don't like that. It makes office hours more difficult as well. I like looking at the error messages and then getting a clue as to what to to look at. Unfortunately, I can't give any information in the grader, as it turns out, because people will find a way to cheat, to abuse the system. If I find a better way to avoid that, my first deployment was my first update, I guess, was to eliminate the keyword raise. So you can't raise your custom exceptions, but then there were students who were legitimately raising exceptions as part of the design of their program. So I don't want to hinder people who are using the features of the language to be able to write their software like as they were intended to be used. They were raising exceptions to catch and then return with their 404 based on the exceptions raised. So I don't want to hinder students who are, being good developers. So I didn't like that approach, and unfortunately, we just go to your feedback on the tests is whether it passed or not, passed, failed, or errored. Yeah. They raise an exception, so they know you have the inputs. When I call route request, you have the inputs, the input request, and then they were raising and in their exception giving all of the inputs, request.path, request.method. What's that? In this particular case, they weren't, was an issue. The reason I don't know if the student is in the room. They might be here, so I'll be a little, I'll be a little careful with what I say. But the reason I caught them was because they reached out to me saying, this isn't working, my code isn't working, what do I do? And I looked at their code and saw that they were doing that. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, they shined a light right on the cheating that they were doing. So it's not a safe assumption to say if they can do that, they know how to do the assignment. But unfortunately, just knowing that loophole exists, I have to plug the loophole because more people, especially now that I'm talking about it in lecture, more people are going to try to do that if I'm vulnerable to that attack. Which is ridiculous. I don't want to go on too much of a rant about it, but like, why? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. Why cheat in general? I don't want to go on that rant, but why cheat in general? You're paying me to teach you things about web applications. Why the hell would you cheat? Or students who don't show up. Like, why even register? Like, why are you here? Why are you even in college? You don't have to be here. I don't understand what a lot of people do. Yeah. Unless I can find a better solution to this, yeah, that's the intent. Yeah, which I like giving the error messages, but it's not something I have to give. That is something I liked giving to give more feedback, but it's not necessary. LO1s used to be manually graded, just like all the other objectives, where you get one shot in manual grading. TA gets an error when they run it. Too bad, you got a 0, or a 1 rather. So I like giving more feedback, but maybe the error messages were too much to begin with. The reason I do like the error messages is if you just have something where the code is right, but it just doesn't gel with the grader exactly the way it's expecting. That's why I like the error messages, but I don't have a good way to close the loophole and give that information. TAs have been answering questions up to Saturday, at least the public ones. Oh, good. Yeah, it's good to hear. Even Saturday, I don't expect them to be watching Piazza over the weekend, so answering questions on a Saturday, that's more than I expect of them. So if that's true, the private questions, there are a lot of private questions. If you look at the public questions, look at the ID. When you click on it, look at the URL. That's the ID for that, and those are auto-incrementing. So look at 2 back-to-back public messages, and look at how much the IDs jump. That's how many private questions the TAs are getting. So when you look at your feed, it might look like 10 public questions and your 1 private question. But to us, there's not 1,000, I don't think we hit 1,000 yet, but hundreds of private questions that we're just completely inundated with all the time. So it looks a lot worse on your end when it's, oh, my 1 question didn't get answered. Well, yours is one of hundreds that we're trying to get through while maintaining our sanity. I say ours, but the TAs. I haven't answered a Piazza question in a while. But the TAs need to maintain their sanity doing that, and it's tough. It's a lot of volume. And if you ask, I'll be a little careful with this one too. If you ask, actually maybe I won't. If you ask good questions, you're more likely to get an answer. We get questions that are like a screenshot of your code and help me, this doesn't work. You're probably not going to get an answer at all. If you do get an answer, it's probably going to be something sarcastic from the TA, like, what's your question, or something like that. If you put good thought into your question and you have an actual like difficult problem to solve and you go through your thought process, like I tried this, I ran the debugger, I have my test cases, and I just can't figure out what the problem is. The TAs are going to jump in there and help. If they can't help, that's when they'll say, hey, we can't figure out this Piazza question. It's a great question, but we just can't figure it out. Then I'll jump in and give it an answer. But if you give a low-quality question, you're going to get either a low-quality or no answer. So if you are having trouble getting answers on Piazza, think about the way you're presenting your question as well. I didn't mean to do this so long, but I'm glad there are questions. Okay, and the TAs have been answering questions. Read that. The autograder for LO1 didn't like me getting environment variables for the AO. The autograder for LO1 didn't like you getting environment variables for the AO? Is that true? Can you send me an email about that one to remind me to look into that? Why would LO1 not like you getting environment variables for the AO? I don't even see how that would affect LO1 grading, the way the grader's set up. So let's say for homework 2 we submitted an incomplete submission. What kind of feedback can we expect to get, and how detailed will they be? I don't understand your question. Just make a blank submission. Just make an incomplete submission and see. Or do you mean feedback from the manual grading? For the manual grading, if it's incomplete, any objectives that you didn't attempt, you'll get a 0. It'll say 0, no attempt. And then anything that you did attempt, you'll get the feedback of what went wrong. Okay. Any other questions? We just had a major deadline day, so I don't mind spending quite a bit of time talking about logistical stuff right now. What's up? During runtime, can you store a variable in an environment variable? Like in the grader? Like, would the grader have an issue with that?
No, just in general, is it safe?
Safe, I'd say no. It's not something that I'd want to do. It's not something I would do. Storing constants in environment variables is usually okay. Storing a variable that I don't know if I can put into words why, but I've never seen that before, and I don't know. It feels wrong, but the only thing I'm coming up with off the top of my head is if another program is also, like if you get in a habit, here's a good reason not to do that. If you get in the habit of doing that across like all your programs, and you have 2 different programs running that both use like TMP as an environment variable, and they're running at the same time, they're going to have a collision because you're basically using a global namespace. It's even more global than the program's global namespace. It's OS global namespace. So if you have any naming collisions when you start doing that, it's going to cause issues. Granted, we always have that whenever we use environment variables, but if we use them for constants, it feels less wrong. For the homework, if you want to do that for the homework and it works for you, I mean, if it works, I'm not going to stop you and you'll get your grade. Can you refer to me where the report for Project 1 details are located? Like this? In week 5? Is that what you mean? Similar reason why we can't use list as a key for dictionary. Question mark? Wait, is that a question? I read that as a statement. Why you can't use a list as a key for a dictionary? I mean, you can, it's just not a good idea. Right? You can't? Can you? I don't even know. I've never tried it because it's a terrible idea. Does Python even let you do that? I don't know. But it's a bad idea if it does. Like Java will let you use an array list as a key in a map, but it's a bad idea. You shouldn't do that. Can't in Python. Okay, good. You shouldn't be able to. It's a dumb idea. It's a terrible idea. Okay, 15 minutes in, we better get into this. So we're talking about video this week, and we do have time to chat like that. Friday's lecture is going to be all about testing and examples and stuff. We have a full lecture where we're going to be kind of open-ended and doing whatever we need to do to fill in the gaps. And I got some examples I'll use if there are no other gaps. But let's talk about the content. Video, this whole week we want to focus on how to handle video uploads. So how do we handle video uploads? We already handle file uploads, and we talked about that in context of images. So how do we handle video uploads? The same exact way. There's nothing different to it. Video files are a bunch of bytes. Image files are a bunch of bytes. Hell, text files are a bunch of bytes. They're just a bunch of bytes that you can safely convert into text using a text encoding. But you already handle video uploads, no big deal. You have your form, you do all your multi-part parsing stuff, you start uploading images, and you say, I want to upload videos now. When you have your file picker, and you pick an image, instead of picking an image, pick a video, done, already done. So video uploads, multi-part forms, same exact way we did image uploads, no difference at all. So that's easy. But how do we display it on the front end? This is the part that gets a little bit different, how we're going to display. So LO3, for the most part, is a front-end objective. You got to check the file type, and the rest of it's a little bit of front-end. So objective 3 on the homework. By the way, objective 3 on homework 3 should be pretty straightforward. LO1 and LO2 have quite a bit of difficulty. I'd say LO1 is probably the most difficult, and then it's a little bit downhill from there. LO2, you're taking what you built in LO1 and adding the feature of uploading images. And then LO3, you're adding videos to that, which is a matter of changing your image element to a video element that we're about to talk about. And that's LO3. No one should be getting credit for LO1 and LO2, but not LO3. Make sure you finish up LO3 as well. Don't say, well, I'll wait till the final deadline to finish up LO3. Get your LO3 done. I'd say even anyone getting LO1 should get all 3 LOs for this. They're all very related, and the core concept of homework 3 really is multi-part uploads. How do we handle these file uploads using this multi-part format? That is the fundamental concept that you're learning, and we're applying it to images and videos. There's nothing special about images and videos, though. That's just the file formats I chose for supporting binary file uploads. So displaying videos, we don't use an image element because that's for images. We use a video element because that's for videos. This one's pretty straightforward, at least off the bat here. We use the video element. Video element works very similar to an image element. We need to give the video element the source of the video, the source file, and then that file is going to play in the browser. Surprisingly straightforward. The first time I ever did videos, so many years ago or whatever, I'm like, all right, I'm sitting down, I'm like, I want to display a video on my web page. I'm going to figure out how to do this. It's going to take a while and everything. And then the internet's just like, dude, HTML5 is a thing now, just use a video element. And I'm like, oh. Click, click, click. Oh, it's done. Okay, I support videos now. I support video playback now. So pretty straightforward these days. Before HTML5, which was forever ago, video support wasn't really a thing, but now it's built into every browser natively. Any modern browser supports video playback natively. Okay, so let's go through this a little bit. The width, I'm not really mentioning, but it's nice to have some width, or else your size of your video element is going to be the resolution of the video in pixels, so it can get a little bit out of hand if you have a high-resolution video you're uploading. Just like your high-resolution images, having some limit to the width can really help. And then we have quite a few extra attributes here. There's a lot of extra attributes you can use. I like these 3. Depending on my use case, I like these 3. Controls is going to actually display the controls to the user. If you don't have controls there, all these controls are hidden, and it's just a video playing, and the user can't adjust anything with it or even pause it, which is a very rude thing to do to your users. You should have controls at the very least. Autoplay does what it implies. Muted does what it implies. But a few caveats to this. If you have autoplay, some browsers won't respect the autoplay. And for fairly good reasons. It's really annoying when you go to a web page and a bunch of videos start playing, especially if they have sound. It's very annoying from the user experience, as I'm sure you, I hope you agree with, depending on what site you're visiting, though, I guess. So some browsers won't autoplay. Specifically, Chromium-based browsers won't autoplay unless you also have the video muted. So if you put muted here and autoplay, then it will actually autoplay your video. But it depends on browsers. Different browsers have different user experience behavior built in like this. When you're testing your stuff, if your video doesn't autoplay, check your console and see if the browser is blocking the autoplay, and then just click play manually. It's not too big of a deal for testing, but it can change your user experience by quite a bit if you're not expecting that. And then add your source for your video. I'm adding this as a source element inside the video element and specifying the file, or not even the file, but the path. So just like the source of an image, I'm going to get another request for the path space.mp4, and that's where I'm hosting this file. You know, in our app, it would be like public/video/space.mp4 or whatever. And then I'm specifying the MIME type with the type attribute and saying that this is an MP4 video. And then I get this video displayed to the user. That's how it's going to show up. It's going to use the browser's default video player. Every modern browser these days has a video player built into it. And with this tag, you're going to get the browser's default video player. So it's going to look a little different, just like the file picker. It's going to look a little different across browsers. But in one browser, the default video player is going to look the same across every single web page on the internet. And now a lot of major video sites don't use the default player. You'll notice the playback doesn't look like this in most videos you see on the internet. So if you're going to like YouTube, they have their own custom player. They're not going to use the default browser player. And you can actually use this syntax. You can do src just like an image and pretend your video element is just like an image element. The only difference, the video element is not self-closing, so you do need the separate close the video tag, close the video element tag. Is that what I'm trying to say? But you do have to have the open tag and the close tag for it. Other than that, you can use the same syntax. It's not really recommended to do it this way because I can't specify the MIME type of this video. Now I have to rely on the browser sniffing out the MIME type, figuring out what type of video this is to figure out how to play it, how to start the playback. And you can only have one source this way. I can specify source equals this path, but I can't specify another path, which why would I ever want two sources? Seems silly at first, but that actually is something we like to do, is having multiple sources of the same video, usually. I guess you could do it with different videos, but the same video in different formats. So here I have the same video in 3 different formats, and what the browser is going to do is go through this list and play the first video that's in a format that the browser supports. Most browsers do not support these first 2 formats. We'll talk about both of these on Wednesday, the MPEG- and HLS formats. Most browsers do not support these natively, so in most browsers, this would fall back to the MP4, but if it does support one of the other formats, it'll play the first one that it does support. So it's a way of giving the browser a list of preferences. We prefer the MPEG-, then the HLS, then the MP4, but only if the other 2 are not supported. So browser is going to play the MP4 in most cases here, but we're giving it some choices as to what to support. And then finally, some text after all the sources. This is what's going to be displayed in only very, very old browsers at this point if the browser itself does not support video playback at all. So if it doesn't support the video element in this HTML5 video element, like I said earlier, HTML5 is pretty old at this point. Every browser should be supporting this, but if somebody's running Internet Explorer and hasn't updated their device in 10 years, maybe they don't support video playback. You'll just give them a message that says, your you don't support this, there's nothing I can do for you, or nothing I'm going to do for you. Like, at some point, I don't know, we should just cut those users off and say, update your damn browser. But depends what your use case is, what your market is. If you're Facebook, you probably don't want to do that. You want to keep your old people on the site. But depending on what your application is, you may or may not care. It's my opinion, I guess. Can we choose earlier version of our code to be graded? No. Why would you want to do that? I mean, why would you want to do that aside from taking the earlier version, downloading it, and re-uploading it? If you want that to be graded, you should have re-uploaded that one before the deadline. It doesn't make sense to me why you wouldn't do that, unless you're panicking at the very last minute, and in that case, I mean, you're stuck with what you got there. I'd have to know the exact situation for that one. And I guess in theory, I'm not opposed to that. But it's like, why'd you make it more complicated than you had to? You could have just re-uploaded it. Okay, so on homework 3, when you want to support video uploads, you'll get the upload. There's only one form for file uploads, and you'll have to determine, is this a video or an image? If you determine that it is a video, it's a lot of the same procedure as the procedure for images. Oh, come on. As the procedure for images, you're going to save the file to disk with some naming convention. And since you're figuring out the type of the file, there is actually a small time saver here, is that you can save these as like media1, media2, media3. You don't have to save them as image1.jpg, image2.jpg, video1.mp4, video2.mp4. Just save it however, whatever naming convention you have, and it can be the same for images and videos for what it's worth. But save the video to disk just like you did with an image, and then create the HTML. But instead of the HTML being an image tag, this is where it does matter which type the upload is. If it's a video, create the HTML for the video element. With this, similar to this, I mean, if you use exactly this, I'm not gonna fight you on that one. But then put your file name, whatever naming convention, whatever pathing convention you have. If it's public/video/ file name / video1.mp4, if it's public/media/media1, whatever your naming convention is for your pathing there. And just note, this is something, I don't know, I might have to redesign the front end next semester to get rid of this because it's annoying, but it is okay for your homework. Thought I saw homework 2 there, homework 3. That we are using polling at this point. We will get rid of polling in homework 4, so we'll get rid of this issue. But for now, we are using polling, and your video is going to be HTML stored as the user's chat message. So you're on the polling, you get chat history. That chat history is all the HTML, which replaces all the existing HTML. And then the browser is going to request every image and video, all the media, and populate everything. So every time the polling hits, your videos are going to reload, and your images, you'll get a lot of flickering. The videos will go back to the start of the playback. They might pause again if the autoplay doesn't play nice with the browser. So it's going to be a pretty horrible user experience. I just want to make it up front that that is okay. As long as the images and videos do appear, we don't need the great UX. Obviously, in the real world, you would fix that UX and make it significantly better. We will fix that in, actually, will we? Maybe we will. Fix that in homework 3 when we do WebSockets. But for now, for homework 3, or homework 4, did I say homework 3? Homework 3, that's okay. It's going to be a terrible user experience. That's fine for grading purposes, as long as your videos display properly and can be played within the polling intervals. Okay. Any questions on this stuff? There's really not much I had to say about videos yet. We, of course, have a full week, but this is the crux of it. For LO3, This is your video tag. And did I mention this? I don't know if I went through the whole thing. You're going to save the HTML in the database as the chat message for that user. So you're generating, I did say this on Friday, didn't I? You're generating the HTML, so it is trusted. Every piece of that HTML was generated by your server, including the naming convention for the file names. So there's no chance for a user to inject HTML into that, except possibly the contents of the file itself. So we have to be a little careful there. I don't have any security things on the homework for that one, so we don't have to for the homework, but there's the potential for an attacker to do something nasty there. As long as we got our MIME types and our no sniffs, it shouldn't be much of an issue. But it shouldn't be an issue for us. But we're going to save this HTML in the database as the chat message, and then when that chat is retrieved by the front end, it'll throw that on the web page and render the HTML. Because it is unescaped HTML, it will render as the video. Make a request for your video file, download that, and then display the video to the user. So any questions on any of that? The video plays in chat. So if I don't log in, it should say guest in chat, colon, and then the video should be right there in chat. Same with images. Okay, any questions on this? Okay. So there's some talk of file formats on the homework, so let's talk about that. For Learning Objective 3, and this is my last slide for learning objectives. For Learning Objective 3, you have to figure out what the file format is. And for that objective, I say it in the homework document, but I'll say it here too. To check the file format in LO3, it's acceptable for you to check the file extension. So get the user-supplied file name, and if it ends with JPEG, it's an image. If it ends in MP4, it's a video. And it's only those two file formats that you have to support. Check the file extension, the last 3 characters of the user-supplied file name when they upload it, and that's how you're going to tell, then set the MIME type to image JPEG or video MP4 when you serve those files, and generate the HTML for their chat message based on that file extension. That's perfectly fine. In general, we can't trust file extensions. The only reason file extensions really exist is 2 reasons. One, it's helpful for us. If I'm looking at a file and I see its file name ends in .mp4, I can be reasonably assured that I'm looking at a video file. It also helps the operating system. Our OS is going to look at the file name and decide, okay, this ends in .pdf. I'm going to use my PDF viewer, the default PDF viewer, to open this file if my user double-clicks this thing. If they want to open this, the default program is going to be based on that file extension. If you change the file extension, the operating system is going to use a different default program to open that file. But these 2 reasons are completely user experience reasons. There's no fundamental behavior. There's nothing special about this file extension. It's literally just part of the file name. We just decided if our file name ends in this, that's a way that we can communicate the type of the file in a more human-friendly way. Nothing special about them. So since it's not part of the file itself, it's part of the file name. One, it's not associated with the file at all. Oh, I got the wrong thing highlighted, but it's not part of the file at all. It's part of the file name, which only exists when that file is saved to disk on some file system. Otherwise, it's not associated with that file at all. So when we're uploading a file and sending these bytes over the internet, there's nothing about the bytes of that file that contains the file extension. We have to add a separate header to get that file name in there. We have that content disposition, which says the original file name. Without that header, we have no way of knowing what the file extension is or what the file name was. It's not part of the file itself. And we can change the file name. If you take a .pdf and rename it to .gif, it's going to be treated like that by the operating system, and we're going to think it's a GIF, but it's not going to, like, it didn't change the contents, it didn't change the type of the file, it's just part of the file name, and we can change that. We can even delete it entirely. You can save a file without a file extension. It's perfectly legal. It's just part of the file name. There's nothing special about file extensions, meaning that they can be spoofed. And incompetent user might have the wrong file extensions, but a malicious user might intentionally use the wrong file extension. And if you're looking at the file extension to try to get the file type, just not a reliable way to do that. Granted, the thing we're going to talk about is a solution. The attackers can still spoof that, so we're not going to be completely out of the woods on this one, but we're going to get a little closer. So that's the end of learning objectives. Check the file extension for LO3. That's perfectly fine. For AO1, you can't do that anymore. And I'm only going to have one slide on how to do that. But at this point, we are done with LO1, LO2, LO3 on homework 3. So all the learning objectives are in your hands. If you're not concerned with the AOs, the whole homework is on the table. Everything after this is application objective content, with the exception of Friday. Friday's going to kind of be overall just how to do homework 3, tips, tricks, debugging, all that kind of stuff. But the rest of today and all of Wednesday will be application objective stuff. And AO1 is one slide. File signatures, I just got to talk about what they are. I wasn't even going to talk about them at all. I dropped a hint in the homework document itself that said you might want to look up file signatures. But file signatures is what you want to look up. And this is what actually identifies the type of the file. And these are somewhat reliable. They're more reliable than file extensions. This will tell the program. It's the first few bytes of the file is the file signature, and it tells us, any program that's opening it, or anyone looking at the contents of the file, tells us what type the file is without using the extension. So if we have the wrong extension, we can always check the file signature to figure out what type the file is. I say always, I don't mean always, because since these are part of the bytes of the file, an attacker can always spoof these two, like I mentioned on the last slide. These can still be spoofed, and if we have a corrupt file, sometimes looking at the signature can help us figure out what the file actually is supposed to be, or if the file signature is wrong and the contents are correct, we can fix the signature. A lot of things we can do with this. It helps us if we have the bytes of a corrupt file. Some of the bytes, like halfway through the file, are corrupted. We can look at this meta information and start piecing together what this file actually is. A corrupt file isn't necessarily unreadable. We just got to repair the file first. So we're going to look up the first bytes of the file and use that to figure out what type it is. So for example, our JPEGs are always going to start with this signature. This is going to say, and I think there's more bytes to the signature. I cut it off for the slide. But these bytes are going to say, this is a JPEG, treat it as a JPEG. So for AO1, when you have to support JPEGs, GIFs, PNGs, and MP4s, and the file extensions can't be trusted, this is what you'll do to figure out what file type is being uploaded. Then get your right MIME type. One of those 4 MIME types should be associated with that file. And then if it's a video file, creating the video HTML, and if it's one of the 3 image files, make sure it's an image HTML to display it in chat. So we check, does the file start with the signature? Check which signature it does match. Look up the MIME type for that signature and associate that MIME type with that file. So that's what's intended for AO1. And to be honest, I don't think AO1's that hard compared to what you had to do to get through the LOs. So this might be a situation where you should aim for AO1 as well. I think this is one of the easier application objectives of the course. So any questions about this? No sniff doesn't work. No sniff is important. I think I forgot to put it on the homework, though. But no sniff is very much important here. Are we going to use the same code base for homework 4 and 5 as well? Yes. Okay. Any questions on that? That's all I got for AO1. I think when I wrote AO1, I thought it was going to be harder, but it turned out to be pretty straightforward. Let's talk about FFmpeg. We're going to use this quite extensively Wednesday. I want to introduce what FFmpeg even is today because we might not have time on Wednesday to talk about it. So let's talk about what FFmpeg even is. what is this thing? And this is the solution. This is software for video manipulation. It is the solution for editing videos, modifying videos. This is what seemingly absolutely everybody is using to modify a video. If you're like, I don't use FFmpeg and I do a whole bunch of video editing, whatever software you're using to do your video editing, I'm willing to bet that it's using FFmpeg under the hood. FFmpeg is the library for editing, manipulating, doing whatever you want with videos. So with FFmpeg, this is software that we have to install. So similar, should I even say that? I'll say it, but it's not really similar. Similar to your database, except not quite. It's not going to run in a separate container. But similar to your database, it is separate software that you're going to utilize to be able to get the job done of your program. So for local testing, you would install this on your operating system so you can play around with the commands and test it in a convenient dev environment. And then when you go to submit your homework, making sure that this is in your Docker file. I'm not even on the right slide, but make sure it's in your Docker file to make the installation happen, so that program does exist inside your Docker container. And you are allowed to use client libraries. My expected solution, I think, which will be the easier one, but maybe just because I'm used to making syscalls, is to make a system call and invoke the command line FFmpeg from your code. If you don't want to do that, if you want to look up a client library and use that, I have a brief demo, but I'm not going to get too into the client libraries. I don't know how much it does of what we need it to do anyway, the client libraries that are out there for Python. But if you want to use a client library, kind of like how we use PyMongo, you're welcome to do that. I'm not going to stop you. That's perfectly fine. The client library is just going to make the syscalls for you. It does the same thing, but it does a little bit of extra UX to it, a little bit easier to use than the command line calls directly. So either way, you do have to install FFmpeg. Since the client library is just making the system calls for you, you still have to install the software that you're making a syscall to. If you haven't done syscalls before, I don't know what other course this comes up in. Maybe none of them. I don't know. Have any of y'all heard of syscalls before? Operating systems does? Okay. So if you haven't taken operating systems, a syscall is where from your code you're invoking another program on your device. So from Python, you would call, as if you were typing it in the command line, call your command line call to FFmpeg. Where do I talk about? Oh, I already passed it. That was my problem. So yeah, you have to install it on your Docker file too. Make sure this is installed in your image. So here's a very basic sample usage of FFmpeg. We're taking an input AVI video of type AVI using the -i flag and converting it into an MP4 using the -f flag. So -i indicates the input file name. If you haven't messed around with command line arguments too much, just very briefly, you have a flag, and then the argument right after the flag is associated with that flag. So this is read as one argument. I have a -i input video.avi. This is saying the input video is input video.avi. And then -f MP4. This is saying the format of the output file should be MP4, so we want to convert this AVI to MP4. And then the last argument with no flag, the last argument is with FFmpeg specifically, the last argument is always the output file name with no flag. I don't have to do like a -o for output or any of that. Just the last argument is always the output file name. And we can change the resolution with the -s flag if we want to do that. I want to change the resolution to 640 by 360. -s is going to do that for me. And there are lots and lots and lots of flags. This is very powerful software with seemingly infinite, obviously not literally infinite, but lots and lots of options available. We'll get into more of them on Wednesday. I just want to show basic usage today. And this will change the resolution as it does the conversion. And let's see this in action. Where do I even want to start? All right, so I have this, let's do it this way. I have this space.avi. Let me start this way, actually. I have space.avi and space.mp4 in a video. Let's open this in our browser. And we can see the video. It auto-plays. Yay, we get video. We showed that in the slides. If I remove this MP4, what I'll notice is that my browser doesn't support AVI. It can't play that AVI video. So I was falling back to the MP4 because my browser isn't supporting the first video format. So if I did not have the MP4, what we'd want to do is create it. So let's do ffmpeg-i for the input, space.avi, -f mp4, and make sure I use a file name I haven't used. Looks like I didn't use output.mp4. So I'm going to convert this space.avi to an mp4. And it often takes a while. It's re-encoding an entire video. This is, I think, about 30 megabyte video, so it's not huge, but still got to re-encode an entire video. It takes a little bit of time. And then we have output.mp4. I'm going to use output.mp4, and I'll have that same exact video. Oh, work for me. Come on. Oh, I had such high hopes for this too. I did that exact same thing right before lecture and it worked fine. I did output video. Output video.mp4 works. Look, it's going to be in my history still. Space.avi, the only thing I did different was change the resolution, and that worked. Did I have a typo? mp4 space.avi. No. I don't know. I literally just did the same thing. I'm not gonna stress about it too much. But I am gonna stress about it. But we got to move on to the next thing anyway. And so that's how we would use it command line. Obviously, I just typed it into the command line. You would use a syscall from Python if you're handling video uploads. And if you're using a binding, if you're using a client library, there's ffmpeg in Python. You can specify the input. I'm going to flip the input. So let's see, space.mp4 output 3. .mp4. So I'm having commands. It's not command line arguments now with flags. It makes it a little more user-friendly and can separate things into multiple lines, a little more self-commenting. Everything's red. I don't know if it worked or not. It's running. I think it's just taking a while. But it's not giving me any feedback. I'm just going to let it do its thing for a while. Let's let that chill. Actually, I don't have any more time. So this should, once it finishes, it's burning up my CPU right now, my fan's kicking in, but that should re-encode. Oh, sweet. Output 3, and then let's go back to our HTML. Let's rename this output 3, and then we should get, oh, it's hard to tell without the title. And we'll get the exact same video, but flipped horizontally. So I didn't do anything too amazing or anything, but we did modify the video using a client library as a proof of concept. And I don't have music either. Oh, it's not a good day for live demos. Where's my music?